Thank you very much. Good morning from the UK to everybody, and welcome to the launch of our Risk Trends 2025 document. There has never been perhaps a more important time to consider the role and responsibilities of risk managers. We're moving into much more politically transactional global order. Mercantilism and nationalism and fracture are strong drivers of risk in our society. There is a side to our activities which is crucial for individuals and organisations, where we consider the tools, techniques and methods of risk management. Then there is the other side of the societal aspect of what we do, which widens and expands the thinking of the Institute and its members. This drives us to act for the public benefit. As our chairman says in the introduction to the report, which I hope you will all download and read, in 2025 and beyond, risk management challenges are amplified by accelerating technological advances, the attempted global transition to renewable energy, persistent global tensions, and increasing regulatory scrutiny around sustainability and governance. Stephen goes on to say, simultaneously, the enduring impacts of climate change, the rising complexity of cyber threats, economic disparities, war and genocide, and public health vulnerabilities remain pivotal concerns. So, Susanna, can we have the first slide? Okay, so this is the background to what we're doing. This is our focus, and what the publication tries to do is focus on emerging risks and not try to predict the future in what is an increasingly unpredictable world. So rather than guessing outcomes, we believe it's more important to understand how fast things are changing and the challenges business are facing globally. Susanna? So we've put in here a slide or two on AI risk. I'm sure you will talk about this later on in your plenary sessions. Bias, legal and ethical concerns exist for AI systems. They can inherit and amplify biases presented in training data, leading to discriminatory outcomes in risk assessments and decision-making processes. AI is a main factor in assessment of exams, and cybersecurity and data privacy risks. There is an increasing reliance on AI-driven risk management tools, and this raises concerns over data security, potential hacking, and the exposure of sensitive organizational information. I don't think we can underestimate the impact that AI is going to have over the next 3 to 5 years. Susanna? And here we are. This is a snapshot of what our risk practitioners worldwide think about the growing nature. And down in the bottom right there at 64%, I'm going to leave that to Zanele. She may pick that up later. But the interesting thing is that 8 out of 10 practitioners anticipate that the demand for risk management professionals with cybersecurity skills will increase significantly in 2025. You can see the figure in Asia in the bottom left. And 63% of CROs identified cybersecurity and AI as the top emerging risk in 2025. That's been a fairly consistent theme in our surveys over the past few years. Susanna? Okay, so I just want to re-emphasize how the world of risk is changing. We have geopolitical instability, which is a growing concern, with rising tensions between major economies, shifting trade policies, and regional conflicts, adding new layers of uncertainty for businesses. I think you only have to look at the daily news to see that is happening as we speak. Economic nationalism, sanctions, and regulatory changes are making global supply chains more complex and increasing compliance risks. Susanna? So how are we changing to adapt to that? Well, at the same time, emerging economies are struggling with inflation, debt crises, resource scarcity, adding even more volatility to global markets. And on top of that, cyber warfare and state-sponsored attacks are on the rise, pushing organisations to rethink their approach to digital resilience and national security risks. Susanna? So we've got about 4 themes that I wanted to look through. Now, you'll be relieved to know that I'm not going to read through all of these line by line, but I'm just going to pick out 1 or 2 key ones. And this is a thread about strategic integration of risk management. And I think the first one is probably the one I'd just point out. What we should do as risk management professionals and practitioners is build capabilities in strategic risk assessment, including scenario planning and risk forecasting. It is an uncertain world, and I think we have to use these tools and techniques to take a strategic view of what risks we face going forward. The other 2 speak for themselves: closer relationships with business goals, and development of tools that help organisations assess, and this is an important point, both risks and opportunities. Susanna? Okay, well, this is the one that most risk managers and CROs put at the top of their list, and I'm sure Paul who's going to pick up after me, will be able to talk around this. We must have robust cybersecurity frameworks, incident response plans. And as I mentioned about AI at the start, we need to collaborate with legal and compliance teams to address regulatory requirements related to AI, deeper data protection and privacy. Next. So what should we be doing to build resilience in this world? Well, we should conduct regular risk and resilience assessments, including supply chain mapping, geopolitical risk analysis, and this leads on to the scenarios type of planning that we talked about. Diversify our supply chains and establish contingency plans for critical dependencies. And develop crisis management plans and conduct regular simulation exercises to assure preparedness. 4. I don't know if Anita's on the call, but I would hope she might be able to help if she is. ESG and stakeholder trust are major issues, and it's the top one I think that I want to focus on. So we need to integrate ESG into the ERM frameworks. Obviously, we need to ensure compliance with evolving reporting standards, and again, collaboration within teams to assess things like and mitigate things like climate risks, and engage with all stakeholders to maintain transparency and build trust through ESG reporting and communication. Susanna? Okay, so download your free copy. I hope you read it. We have a sister type relationship with the World Economic Forum, and I know the team have been talking to them. They do their risk summary every year as well. Ours is a complementary document to that. They do it from a sort of academic strategic point of view, whereas we do it from what the real practitioners and professionals, yourselves, our members, say. So I think they should be read hand in glove, and we are attempting to work closer with them, the World Economic Forum. And I guess our vision for this report is to increasingly make it more and more relevant and accessible to people. And so the WEF report goes to the pre-Davos meetings. That's where I think this report should develop. It's a big step forward every year, every time I read it. So I'd like to thank everybody who's contributed. And I guess, Paul, it's over to you now, I think. Is that right?
I think so, Ian, yeah. Although I won't speak for too long. I think there's quite a few of us going to say a few words, and then I would have thought that people might want to ask some questions as much as hear from us, if that's cool. Yeah, so to introduce myself, those that don't know me, Paul Saunders, I chair the IRM's Operational Risk Group, which includes the Legacy Institute of Operational Risk that IRM acquired. And I think Ian and the other Ian refers to it as a super SIG, a super special interest group, which encaptures a lot of the things that Ian spoke about, and particularly focuses on practical application within the operational risk management frameworks that most firms run. And you'll all be familiar that there's a definition that's built out of financial services more than anything else that defines what operational risk is, which is governance, people, process, and systems, or failure thereof. So part of what I will talk a little about, and the articles in the publication overlaps a bit with what Ian said at the start, and will overlap with a lot of the other special interest groups who are more subject rich, shall I say. For example, there's going to be a lot of people talk about cyber, as Ian rightfully pointed out, and there is a cyber group that drills down deeply. ORG sits across all and kind of says, how do you manage all the various aspects of risk that come together? And how do you prioritize, and how do you report to boards, etc. So the group that I chaired sort of sat down and thought about the things that we felt were most relevant for operational risk managers this year. And it's not necessarily a complete list, and different firms will have different lists of their strategic priorities in terms of risk management. And I'll just run through the 5 that we felt were still prevalent and probably on the increase in terms of likelihood and impact assessments. So they are geopolitical, which Ian has talked a bit about already, and the impact of the geopolitical environment on organisations and its risk management function and system for internal control. Resilience, which is is born more out of and I use the COVID word again, but something COVID did for us all that was positive was make us think about what was actually necessary. Lots of the time you deal with in risk management with lots of things, but COVID taught us that we have to be resilient in those sort of one-off environments where business is completely dislocated, or the way we do business is completely dislocated, and what is absolutely necessary. And there's a lot of regulations in and around resilience now, which have been brought to bear, particularly in financial services, because disruption there can disrupt a lot of other things. The other aspect we looked at as increasing on people's agendas is financial crime. In tough economic conditions, financial crime tends to go up. And Ian talks about the cyber threat and AI on people's agendas. We now know that criminals are using AI. Small point, but probably most of you, like me, if you look at your emails, you realise that the spam you get now is more and more and more. That is a result of people using AI, as opposed to just sending 1 or 2. You get 10s and 20s now, at least I do. The other aspects of financial crime are, people will probably know, is anti-money laundering, or money laundering. The controls are anti-money laundering. In that respect, when there is more crime committed, then there is more money to launder. And anyone in financial services will realise what a challenge that is for people. The other aspect, again, Ian touched on it, so I think you've done most of my speaking for me, Ian, fortunately, is ESG. That we feel it should be on people's radars. And again, all of these they come together under the ORG, but there are individual teams and individual articles on these things. So mine's a bit of an overview. ESG is becoming more prevalent, and particularly for risk managers, the aspects of reporting around it. So providing information and taking data from firms and actually reporting on things. Cybersecurity, absolutely up there. Becoming more prevalent in terms of what happens and how people control this, and systems are becoming more sophisticated, and more importantly, we're more entwined, and we live our lives off of these little things we hold in our hand called telephones more than anything else now. We're all in touch constantly. So those are the 5, and we always sort of stick to 5 in ORG that we believe that or should be on people's radars, should be part of board reporting. And again, you'll hear from some of those that are more detailed. The 6th item that is in our little article is more about the aspects of risk control and the evolution thereof. so we're all familiar with the whole control risk assessment approach. We're all familiar with op risk frameworks now, and how we look at likelihood and impact and then prioritize. We're all familiar with collecting loss information and how we manage that. And we're becoming more familiar with using scenarios and linking scenarios to those high impact, low probability events, those what I call showstoppers. COVID could have been one of them for some firms, right? And probably was for some firms, hence the resilience aspect. So our risk control frameworks need to evolve. And we feel in the in ORG we talk a lot about that, how these frameworks should evolve, how we should use scenarios a little bit wider and a little bit deeper, and how we as risk managers need to understand the culture of our businesses as much as the application of frameworks to get the businesses to really develop how they manage risk. Those of you in financial services will be familiar with the 3 lines of defence model. The first line being the business, the second line being the risk function, the third line being audit. That model, in my personal view, which has been good in a lot of firms, it is now under pressure and being thought about how that first line and second line interact, and how those that set policy around this then get their assurance. Okay, I have a colleague on, Helen Weaver, who also sits on the ORG. She was just going to say a few words in the detail around 1 or 2 things, and then we'll hand back if there are any questions. And again, as I say, I think we have some people from the more specific risk clusters to talk a little bit more. So Helen, would you like to add anything there?
Thank you, Paul. And yes, thanks for giving me a spot. And absolutely echo everything that the previous speakers have said. You know, these themes are going to echo across, I think, all of these risk topics. There's an additional one, I think, of area of focus, which is around the operational resilience piece, and actually some conjoining elements of, you know, these things are starting to sort of join together now under things such as third-party management, and so that has legs across the financial crime piece, the ESG piece, and also the operational resilience piece. So I think that evolution of risk control is where we're starting to see some of these themes develop, and solutions needing to focus across all of these topics in a coordinated way. So yeah, and that in, of course, this rapidly changing geopolitical environment, which is throwing up, you know, new risks that we're having to evaluate and understand the impact of those on each of these topics. So lots to think about.
Thanks, Helen.
My name is Sospeter Thiga. I'm representing the East Africa Interest Group. So we participated in the survey, and I'll just share the few thoughts that we had, the top 5 risks that we think will shape the East Africa region, and I think even the greater Africa region. I know Zanele is also in the house to talk from a South African perspective. So from East Africa, I think we are seeing economic risks, which are being driven by more of the issue of debt sustainability and financial liquidity. If I speak directly from a Kenyan perspective, Kenya is, of course, heavily indebted, and this is causing quite some strain, and taxation is also quite high, just as a way of improving that fiscal space in terms of raising money to pay off that debt. And this is a key risk. It was a top risk because it has a lot of correlation with the rest of the risks that we'll be talking about. So, for example, political risks. Last year, we had what we call the Gen Z uprising, so a bit of societal and generational shifts here, who rose up because of the economic challenges in the region and demonstrated. And we had the first time in history, the finance bill, which is the annual budget, rejected because of that sort of unrest. And we are seeing that this will continue being a key issue in the region because as we talk, the indicators are not too positive. The impact of this, of course, we'll have an investor shy season where we have a lot of the foreign direct investors shying away because of the political instability and the economic risks that we are facing. if I look at it from a wider perspective, I think we've all been following the news. We've seen what has happened in the DRC, Congo, with the rebels invading one of their key cities towards the east. We've had a bit of upheaval in Ethiopia and Sudan, and even South Sudan. So all these political unrest and political risks are likely to feature strongly in 2025, and they'll affect how the region, progresses forward. The other challenge, of course, in the region is regulatory uncertainty. We've had a season where there are lots of regulatory changes, particularly in the financial sector, taxation. This leads to a sort of uncertainty for people who would want to invest in the region, because tax laws are changing day by day. So that uncertainty is also not very positive for in the investment environment and what have you. The fourth area that we looked at was environmental and climate risks. So the region generally has been facing, the East African region that is, has been facing volatility in the environment space. So unpredictability in weather patterns. When it rains really hard, lots of flooding. And that also has an effect in terms of food security, because when it rains during the harvest season, then lots of the foods that were being grown destroyed, basically. So there's a lot of volatility when it comes to climate, and there's need for a bit of building resilience in that area. I've alluded to the risk number 5, which was a societal risk. We've been seeing a lot of change. So Generation Alpha, Generation Z coming up strongly, making their voices known in an unusual manner, which may be viewed from a political angle in terms of instability, because they go on to riot in the streets, and this really affects the business climate in the region. I think I will move on to the key recommendations. I am quite aligned with what Paul and Ian had mentioned earlier on. Scenario planning is one of the recommendations that we made in the report. So utilizing scenario-based risk assessments to prepare for different potential outcomes. We also thought of alignment of risk with strategy. So integrating the identified risks into strategic and business planning to enhance organizational resilience. The third one was, adapting key performance indicators to the evolving risks. That's by developing flexible performance indicators to adjust strategies based on the dynamic risk landscape. And finally, informing and involving stakeholders decision through comprehensive risk data to support informed decision making across both public and private, and of course leveraging on big data, AI, to further inform risk decision making for the key stakeholders. So that's what we had from the East African side.
Hi everyone, good morning from the UK. Graeme McGibbney, I sit on the Special Interest Group for Cybersecurity. I'm here fairly short notice on behalf of Zanele Makhubu, who contributed to this year's Risk Trends paper. So, Zanele picked quite a few topics within the paper, certainly not enough time for me to go through every single one within a 50-minute spell. So I've decided to take 3 of the topics that she covered off within her paper, and then drill into those in a little bit more detail. Those are AI, surprise, surprise, supply chain, and also quantum computing. So a little bit of the here and now, particularly with AI and with supply chain, and then maybe a bit more for the future and horizon scanning for quantum computing. So from an AI perspective, obviously Ian and Paul have touched on it already. It's the here and now. It's changing technology, it's changing business, it's changing life, culture, and whatnot. And from a cybersecurity perspective, certainly no different. It offers potential opportunities to improve defensive capabilities, so enhanced monitoring capabilities, enhanced vulnerability scanning, CM and SOAR, security orchestration, automation response engines, and hopefully improve the detection rates and the defense rates against attacks. But of course, the other side of the coin also offers the black hat attackers the opportunity to use these technologies for offensive capabilities. And of course, I think it was Ian that mentioned the real increased risk of phishing campaigns and more successful phishing campaigns. You know, AI can write far more convincing phishing emails, therefore an increased rate of targeting and success for that. So really, it's a kind of a chicken and egg scenario with AI from a cybersecurity perspective, and it will evolve over the course of 2025. I think the other angle to consider from a cybersecurity perspective is how are employees within organizations using AI to perform their roles. I think in a similar fashion to we saw earlier on in the 2010s, when it came to Facebook and social media, people didn't really realize that it's not a free tool. It's a marketing tool that, you know, you are the product to some extent. Same with AI. You know, the data you upload into AI, that is being used to train the model. And so organizations, I work for an organization called WPP. We're faced with the prospect of what data, intellectual property, sensitive data, could be uploaded into AI models by our members of staff. So organizations have to have a strong understanding of the types of AI models that they might want staff to use, the risks around those, and also the policies and potentially technical controls that they should be putting in place to monitor and also to prevent AI sensitive information from being uploaded into AI models that they may come into conflict with later on down the line with customers or clients, etc. So an evolving landscape within AI there for sure. The next area I wanted to touch on was on the supply chain. Now, within Zane's paper, she mentioned focused in more around the uses of Internet of Things devices, monitoring devices, etc. within a supply chain. I think from my angle, what I'd like to focus in on is more around the threat to supply chains from cyber attack. So, you know, last year we had whilst technically speaking, not a cyber attack as such, but we saw a major impact from a CrowdStrike perspective when CrowdStrike released code that crashed Microsoft Windows, and that caused major outages across the globe. Now, that as I say, that wasn't specifically a malicious attack. That was obviously an unfortunate lack of testing and code before it was released. But we've seen in the past with things like SolarWinds and years gone by, attacks that are focused in on key players within a supply chain from a security, from a software point of view, where software providers are very ingrained and integrated into companies' networks. And if they are attacked, malicious code is injected into these platforms, they can then be fed into organizations, and attackers don't really need to attack organizations directly. They can go through central source of software suppliers and vendors. So there's, you know, as we've talked already with the geopolitical situation, these type of supply chain attacks for 2025 and beyond will only increase in order to undermine global supply chains, institutions, the modern way that we live our lives, and the businesses that help operate, as well as critical national infrastructure. So organizations really need to understand their own supply chain and their own supply universe. From a software perspective, what are the critical pieces of software? Where does it affect their network if that piece of software was to go down in any way? What would the backup plans be around that? Have they got any backup plans? So all of these things should be, from a risk perspective, really need to be planned in and thought about and understand, and then obviously perform things like security assurance reviews to understand the impact that supply chains can have and obviously effectively mitigate risk. And the last area I wanted to talk about was around quantum computing. So in a similar way to AI has become a big bang of a couple of years ago now with ChatGPT, and all of a sudden AI was everywhere. I think in the next few years ahead, we'll start to see a similar impact and influence from quantitative or quantum computing, whereby it's still in the background right now, but eventually, once it happens, it will really have a significant effect. And it has unlimited potential uses. It will hopefully improve the way that things like, for example, applications for use of portfolio management when it comes to investment portfolios, Monte Carlo simulations when it comes to performing risk analyses and quantifying risk. Reduce the amount of time it will take to actually perform these calculations by exponentially, and also things like fraud detection. But from the other side of the coin, should always remember that quantum computing can also have a real negative effect or a real significant impact. And one of those would be through the potential to really undermine cryptography, modern day current cryptographic algorithms that we use. Whereas right now, data that's at rest or that's in transit is secure enough, and we'll trust the data we're using because it's secure, and the information we're encrypting is secure. If quantum computing comes along, then all of these current day algorithms, it's trivial for quantum computers to actually unencrypt data and break these algorithms. So that already we're seeing some individuals, some specialists within the field saying that we need to prepare now for this coming along the pipeline, whereby we have to look at, from an organization perspective, the algorithms we're currently using, the systems that are relied upon that these algorithms are supporting, and the processes, understanding exactly how do we what are the weak algorithms we might already have, the older algorithms, and actually start to prepare for this era to actually move beyond current day algorithms and cryptographic algorithms, and prepare ourselves for the quantum era. So there's a lot of debate and speculations or discussion as to when quantum computing and the effect and the threat of algorithms could begin. But in research and preparation for this session today, I've seen discussion and expectations that by around about 2028. Quantum computing could pose a threat to cryptographies, for cryptographical currencies and crypto. So the blockchain, etc., that could be under threat. And by about 2030, some of the most secure algorithms we use today, so the RSA 2048, quantum computing could be sufficiently mature enough at that point to completely trivialize and undermine any cryptographic algorithms we use. So we're only talking a space of about 5 or 6 years now between now and the fact that all of the current modern day cryptography we have could well be obsolete. So these things, they're not that far away, and so really it's a case of starting to consider what's the impact, where do we use, what's our influence, our capabilities of cryptography today, and what do we need to do, put in a plan to actually start to move towards a post-quantum where the data we have is held securely and is encrypted in a secure way. So those are 3 areas that we've included within the paper for this year. I believe I'm handing over now to Zanele.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hey. So good afternoon. It's afternoon in South Africa. So we are representing also South Africa in relation to the fast-moving developments in the VUCA world, to also, as a country, to be aware of such an impact that are affecting us, even the global world. So with us, we are looking at recognizing that the VUCA world is bringing in, is volatile, is uncertain, is complex, and is ambiguous. So with that being said, we said we need to adapt quickly and be agile as organization, community at large, as a nation at large. We need to adapt and be agile so that we can be able to build resilient organizations as well as communities, as societies. So what we have picked up from our our risk in terms of the landscape, looking at the challenges, we have found that all the risks are connected across the sectors. And the top 10 that we have identified, the first one is the digital fraud, which is rapidly growing in our South African businesses as well as government institutions. And often enough, this organization, they don't report this fraud that is happening and it's rife. So we are also putting a rider on those issues to say, as risk professional, we need to assist our organizations to be aware of such digital frauds. And then looking at the legal space, we're also facing some challenges, and challenges of economic instability, cybersecurity, diversity, and technological adoption. So in this space, we are learning that in the legal sector, the risk management is not fairly implemented. And we want to zoom in as a South African group just to be able to assist there in terms of how to go about looking into those risks, which are more dealing with the rule of law and the legal discipline. And then the third risk is the systemic corruption, of which also undermines the rule of law, of which it weakens society, as well it weakens our economic growth and erodes societal morale. So with this one, yes, we see this happening a lot, but the repercussions are minimal. We don't see any consequence management with regards to this. Yes, these crimes are being identified, but how do we go about in terms of making sure that consequence management kick in? And then risk number 4 is ethical leadership. We still need ethical leadership to drive organization, to assist community, so that we safeguard our rule of law and the economic emancipation. And then in terms of artificial intelligence, yes, we see as a country this as an opportunity as well as a threat, but it's up to us as organization and community to see what are the wrongs and the wrongs and the do's and don'ts with regard to artificial intelligence. We are embracing it as a country, but we need to be aware of the opportunities and the risks. On the educational system, we also see challenges, especially in the public sector. And then to mitigate this risk, currently we are relying more on the private sector, but with so much improvement, which is also coming in the public space. So we are also looking into that space to see what improvement also can be made by that sector. And then in terms of South African healthcare system, they're also facing challenges, and it also presents opportunities for us to transform the health industry into digital transformation, so that the medical data can be safeguarded and that our clients get a service that they really need as a country at large, especially at a disadvantaged communities. And then in risk number 8 is your infrastructure. This one I will link it also to climate change, which is also risk number 10, because of the extreme weather that we experience, especially the floods particularly in the south coastal regions. You find that even in our township and the country as large, our infrastructure is depleting, and when these extreme events happens, it becomes impossible to manage the risk of disaster, and it also affects the lives of communities and livelihoods. So this is the issue where we need to zoom in as a country and make sure that we maintain our infrastructure. And then with risk number 10, looking at the country as a whole, we know that there's major transformations in terms of energy sector, where now just for us to maintain our grid as a country, we are embarking on the mega projects. And mega projects, we know they come with their own related risk. But so we are looking into this space and see how everything develops with regard to these mega projects. So we are saying as a country, we are looking forward and we are vigilant in terms of this VUCA world, and that we are looking forward to adapt as well as build resilient communities, resilient businesses, as well as resilient societies. But we cannot do this alone as professionals. We all need each other in collaborating efforts. We know also that this risk affecting the global world. It's not only us who are impacted by these exposures and these vulnerabilities, but we are saying there's a room for collaboration. There's a room to say to build thought leadership along this line, so that we shape best practices with our regions, especially we are too close to Eastern Africa, so we will be having those collaborated efforts to look into thought leadership issues and collaborating with the universities to check how we can assist as a profession. Thank you very much.
If there's any questions from anybody, to any of the speakers, or indeed Ian or whoever?
Well, any comments as well, not just
Yes,
questions. Yeah, I'll close it.
Joe has got his hand up.
Oh.
Cheers, Paul. Thanks for all the info as well. Really useful session. I've got two questions, but I'll go with the first one, and then if nobody else asks one, I'll ask the second bit. The first one was around AI. And Graeme gave a great talk there about, you know, what the future holds, how we can kind of adapt. But there's a couple of things which have come up today where I wanted to try and check how they marry up with AI. So where we've talked about, you know, risk managers having that cultural awareness of what the business does at a strategic level, it kind of indicates there's a level of for that cultural knowledge, there's a level of, I suppose, behavior and things which AI doesn't have, with it not being sentient and, you know, feelings and those types of things. So when making decisions as a risk manager, there's probably things which are built into us from a behavioral cultural aspect which AI won't factor in. And where I'm trying to marry this up is, you know, AI will give us things where it removes any bias. It's kind of fundamentally, factually will give outcomes and recommend things on the basis of that information. What I'm getting at here is it'll be very easy for executives to look at that and say, well, you know, our bottom line, we can make cuts here, we can do X, Y, and Z, and that will ultimately result in more profitability to the business. But we will lose an element of that cultural and ethical as well, you know, from just a general economic position. Where I'm going with this, Paul, is how do we marry them two up of better utilising AI, but also retaining that cultural and ethical element that we've spoken about?
I think it's a really good question, Joe, and I'm not sure I can, and probably most people can do it justice at the moment, because I think it's something that's going to play on our minds for a long period of time. I mean, we always talk about, you know, frameworks in risk and approaches, and then we talk about the culture, you know, more broadly speaking, right? So be it any particular risk topic or be it more holistically. And I'm a big believer, and maybe I'm a little old school, but like, regardless of what data tells me and regardless of what thing, you know, I still place value in what I call the sniff test, right? If it doesn't look right, if it doesn't quack, it's not a duck, right? So, but at the end of the day, I get your point a lot. Graeme may have a view on it in the specifics, but I'm not sure we have the answer yet. And it's a really good observation. How do you keep that sort of that non-bias element, that human intervention, when more and more we're using tools and techniques that, you know, a lot of them are beyond our knowledge. I mean, I thought Graeme's presentation was brilliant, some of which, you know, is well beyond what I could comprehend as a risk manager. And you know, and it's very valuable to have people like Graeme that can do that, right? But it, generally speaking, not all of us are to that level of understanding, and we're depending on this black box, or black boxes, shall we say? Does that? I know it's not a good answer to your question, and
yeah, to be honest with you, the fact that you've kind of said that there isn't an answer it gives me a bit more comfort, because I'm looking at that from my own perspective in my own organisation, and I'm like, how do we make this work? And I don't have the answer. So it's good to know that most people are in the same boat, and it's not just me.
Yeah, and
Graeme, would you have something to add? Or
yeah, I would. I think, Joe, this is a really pertinent question, and from our perspective, from the IRM's perspective, we've identified risk culture, ethics, and people risk as something that we want to develop a short award for 6-week qualification, where we explore these issues, because we don't have the answers, and I'm, I don't know if Graeme has, but it's something where we want to explore it with members and others, to try to bottom out what you're talking about. And to support that, we're actually going to put out a publication, a book, on the whole subject of risk culture, people risk, and ethics. And guess who's writing it? Our chair, Stephen Sidebottom. So that, it is a live topic for us. And like Paul said, I don't think we've got the answers, but we need to explore it and to try to provide something for you guys to work around. Is that all right?
Cheers. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. There was one other question I had, but sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, did Graeme want to add anything there? Because
I was just going to agree with you, Paul, and Ian as well. I think the bit of an anecdote here, but I remember there was back in, I think it was early 2000s, David Bowie had a conversation with Jeremy Paxman on Newsnight about the internet. And Jeremy Paxman was saying, well, it's just just another communications tool. And David Bowie said, well, no, it isn't. It's going to change everything. And obviously, he was right. And I think similarly to the internet and what it did in the early 90s and obviously evolved from there, AI's a similar technology where we actually don't know the impact it will have. It's all of its full capabilities and also the threats that it will bring to society at large, industries, and there's a lot of uncertainty around it. So no, absolutely, I don't think any one person can have an answer really on it. Yeah, I think its applications are still almost in its infancy and how it can be used. Obviously, I've been looking at it from a cybersecurity perspective, but it could be used in multiple ways in the future, and it's very difficult to be able to forecast it just yet. So yeah, no more than that, I'm afraid. No answers, no clear-cut answers as of yet.
No worries. I did have a second question, if I'm okay to go, and it's kind of related but a separate point. Am I okay to go? Has anyone else got their hands up there? Then?
Go for it, Joe. You're the only hand up at the moment. So.
Cheers. It might be one back at you then, Graeme, as well, in terms of what I'm about to ask, but the speed at which technology is developing as well seems to be getting quicker by the day. And what I mean by that is the changes between, say, 2015 and 2025 aren't going to be the same as the speed at which the change happens between, or doesn't appear to be the same at which the speed happens between 25 and 2035. My point being that, how do we change things so we can react quickly to the risks and the opportunities and everything that's out there, but we can react as quickly as technology is evolving? Because when, again, I just to put myself in this for context, I work in a public sector organisation, notoriously slow at implementing technological change. So by the time we've tried to implement something and we've kind of fully risk assessed the business requirements for it, there'll likely be another adaptation or another advancement or something. And how do we get on top of that, I suppose? Again, this isn't an answer for my business per se, but more generally, how do organisations, or is there any thoughts around how organisations can get on top of that so they're responsive to the changes in technology as quickly as the changes are actually occurring?
Did you want to take that one again, Graeme? I have just one little point to add on it, but it's not a direct answer to the question, but you probably...
Me too.
Yeah, I can have a stab at it for sure. So I think that, yeah, it's difficult. It's very difficult in big institutions or in public sector, etc., where the rate of change can often be quite slow to implement. I think organisations have to be very, or institutions like that have to be very aware of the almost have an open conversation, I would say, with staff around technologies, and try and set some ground rules early on to say, look, we're aware of and we understand why you might be wanting to use AI as an example within your space to try it out, to try and improve your output or to reduce manual tasks, etc. But you also need to be aware of these issues here, and why we want you to be very careful about its uses, and we want to mandate the specific uses that we want to see technologies being used for in your role. Set up maybe working groups and forums, etc., where individuals can maybe interact with organizations and get clearance and advice and guidance perhaps on how whether they should be using technologies in a specific way. But yeah, no, it's I agree. It's not easy to kind of clamp down or to try and restrict use straight out. But I would say it has to be an open conversation. You can't hopefully wishful think on people to know how to use technologies in the right way. As an anecdote we've seen in my organisation, people have been uploading their own credit card details into AI for whatever reason, and it's the ground rules, trying to establish some ground rules. You have to keep ahead of it. It's always about horizon scan. That's part of risk management anyway. It's about horizon scanning, understanding how to use technology, understanding potentially the future technology that's coming down the pipeline, and then possibly just in the initial term, preparing some communication, some ground rules for staff to know and be aware of, and then maybe a policy and restrictions or technical preventative controls can be put in place later on down the line. Hopefully that helps, Joe. I'll hand over to you, Paul, if you've got any other points there.
Yeah, but the only thing I was going to say, it may be similar to Ian, but I'm sure Ian will have more thoughtful things than me to say. I'm joking, by the way, Ian. Look, anything to do with technology, I've always believed that you've got to be able to pull the plug. And the resilience agenda kind of proves that as well, right? The more and more we use tech, and if you look at the resilience agenda, it's all about understanding key business processes, then optimizing them, and then going, what would you do if they didn't work the way you're making them work? And I think we're moving very much in the operational risk space from what was a sort of semi-manual environment in a lot of organizations to almost non-manual, with the use of AI and things, which I don't understand as well as Graeme, as I say. But I do understand that if you've got a black box doing something and you don't know how to stop it, it can go AWOL. Case in question, going back years and years ago, you'll all remember Black Monday, when the stock exchange had to pull the plug on its what was essentially its set system that was doing the trading, because they put it in, and every transaction was in there and stacking up, without pulling the plug, the market would have fallen off of the radar, right? It's so anyway, my little point is, technology is great, but as a risk manager, what do you do if it doesn't work, and how do you stop it if it goes wrong? I suppose it's a short way of saying that. Ian?
Yeah, my 2 pence worth, Joe, is, and this is an organisational design problem, and it's a culture problem. And I was in Whitehall for a while, so I understand what the environment you're working in. But whether it's in temporary working groups or whether it's task forces, you've got to introduce, when technology is as disruptive as this, you've got to introduce some kind of nimbleness into the organisation to be able to react to it. And the bottom line is that there is an imperative here. There's a phrase, it might be hackneyed, but if you don't do it to yourself, it'll get done to you. And I think AI was going to do a lot of things to a lot of organizations. And so, it sounds easy, but the organizations need to get on the front foot and find their own way of not being dragged along by AI or obliterated by AI or whatever, but managing it into the organization. Does that help, Joe?
It does, yeah. Really useful. Thank you.
I think this proves the point that just how big these debates are, and this is the benefit of the IRM's special interest groups and approach to these things, right? To get consensus, to get views, to get opinions, and the more of this that happens, the better. So I mean, I applaud what IRM are trying to do as an organisation, not for profit, for getting us as risk managers to really start to have some of these conversations. Without a body like IRM, we tend to operate in our own silos, right? So yeah, it's good discussion.
Okay, shall I wrap it up, Paul? We've done an hour. Is that okay?
Yeah, words of wisdom here.
I have very few of those. Thank you to everybody who's attended today and for listening. Thank you for everybody who contributed to the report. But I just want to underline what Paul just said there. The engagement and the work of the special interest and regional interest groups is a it's two things. It's a functional, useful way for the Institute and members to engage and to do things and understand things. And it's also actually a USP for the IRM, because we have dispersed groups in dispersed sectors all around the world. And the content and the thinking that you generate is absolutely terrific. So thank you for that. Thank you, everybody. I hope it was beneficial. I'm sure somebody will send an email out telling you what the link is to download the report. And thank you very much, everybody.